take that one aside. Anybody have questions with her presentation? You are free to ask. But please, those that were here earlier have had explain on the total budget. Go ahead.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your mic.
Okay, sir.
Chairman, your mic. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, honorable colleagues. My name remains Hademori Alikuye. I represent Shomolu Federal Constituency. Madam, on your page 3 here, I saw payment or issuance of sum of 3.787839. That's table 4.
Now, what does the role with the operational budget?
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. The operational budget first. Okay, before we come to. Okay.
That will deal up to section 6.
Okay.
Those are concerned with the operational budget. So that will separate it from.
Thank you.
The one is very good. Then the second stage is the debt service performance. Our commitment for 2021 budget to the provision for total debt service as a line in budget for 2021. She clearly stated what was used to service domestic debt and external debt. As of today, we've done about 72%. Meaning that our obligation.
She explained that this was just like it's done from the federal through the from CBN. Yes, right. So it's not even there. They're supporting.
No, we just report it because we're the ones who do the projection.
They do the projection, they do everything there.
We do the projection.
They prepare and they pay.
Yes.
Then the assignment for this year, total new borrowing to fund 2021 Operation Act. I remember that initially, like you said, for domestic it was 2.3 trillion, and later on, for domestic, later on the supplementary budget, then, 802 billion. And the standard borrowing of 6.18 will come to 2.34. Out of it, she told us that we've taken 4, and she's still waiting to take 2.18. Is that okay?
Where is the 2.1 it's written?
No, it's not. It's not taken now yet.
Paragraph 12, sir.
12.
11 and 12.
Yes.
11 and 12.
Yes.
But the Eurobond, the 7-year instrument note was at 6.125% per annum. 12 years came to 7.375%. While the 30 years was the great branches, 7, 12, and 30 years at 1.25 is about 8.25%. If you look at it, so while that is there, yeah, another question. I'm much interested in the promissory notes as listed. Promissory notes, yeah, it's been prepared by Permanent Secretary, Special Disease in the Finance.
Go to paragraph 13 now.
Yes, we're at 13.
Okay.
Promissory notes.
Okay.
We've looked at it. The oil marketers are those, are we going them, is this subsidy or on the recovery? What is it?
This one,
Because there's a term for subsidy now. We call it on the recovery.
that's how many people knows it. Okay, so let me just go back a bit. So in 2017, there was some work done by various ministries to ascertain all the areas of government. So there was Ministry of Finance, Works and Housing, various. So Works and Housing, for instance, was involved in payments due to contractors, due to state governments who had executed federal projects. Then the oil marketing was done primarily by PPPRA and the Ministry of Finance. There was a desk there working on it. So there was a total of 3.4 trillion naira that was presented to the Federal Executive Council in August 2017, and it was approved. And then the President sent that whole list. So there are 13 political categories to the National Assembly for approval for compliance with the Fiscal Responsibility Act. So what then happened was, I believe ad hoc committees were created, at least in the Senate, to review those submissions. And what happened was they were now being approved piecemeal. The entire thing was not approved at once. So all marketers were approved, state governments. In fact, what you have for state governments here is 2 tranches. Because the first one was about 487, then another one came for 148. So basically what we have here for all marketing companies, state government, exporters, local contractors, represent what the National Assembly approved. So once you approve it, we issue them.
Okay.
Yes.
So,
Honorable Adequate,
so what you're saying is that you only pay what is approved by the House,
the National Assembly.
the National Assembly.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
There's an exception for 5, which I think was a question.
So, but what you're saying is that it passes through finance, gets to executive, FEC comes to National Assembly, what they authorized to pay. It is the process that we're looking at, because beyond that, today we know that contractor liabilities in the country is quite beyond what we're seeing. So the instruments that have been provided for contractor liability, you say it's about, you said 57.
They're the ones in foreign currency as well.
Yeah?
They're the ones in
Foreign currencies.
I've seen it. The 26 million US dollars and the 57 billion naira amount. And Euro 133 million too.
And, excuse me.
Okay.
Thank you.
These judgment dates too, these judgment dates, land 5 here.
Yes, sir.
I mean, who determines which judgment debt to pay and at what stage you pay them?
Included in the categories, the 13 categories that FEC approved and brought in us for a judgment debt as well. One category is there. And the National Assembly has not considered that. Like I say, the National Assembly was picking which ones to approve. Like contractors are much more than this. There are small contractors and there are big contractors, but you haven't approved all of them. It's only what you approved that we pay. So with this judgment debt, this single one here, this was presented by through the Ministry of Finance, based on the advice of the Honorable Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice, as, will I call it an emergency or high priority? Because they were going to foreclose the Nigerian High Commission in London.
Okay, the property.
Okay, so the condition we put there in processing it is that the ministry will ensure for this one that they pass it through FEC and National Assembly. No, we put it in writing, and the minister signs the promissory note. I'm just a witness. Okay.
Why I raise it, Mr. Chairman, it's because I know that you have not considered the approval
That's
of
right.
any judgment here.
That's right.
Since we came. So, and to see this kind of money, I mean, this is dollars.
Yep.
It's not naira. That's why I raised it. So, you know where. So it's still coming to us before approval.
That's what we put in the
Why
memo.
didn't you extend the vehicle
Huh?
Why did they extend
Meaning everything will finish
Everything
up to
done.
30th September.
So by December 31st,
It may change.
new intrams will be uploaded into it. So now,
Sorry, Chairman, let me explain to you. This is ASAT, meaning everything that has been issued, not the dates they were issued. I don't know, does that help?
This is as at September.
I understand that.
I understand.
Okay.
It's a central bank.
Commissioner for that, I'm a big man for finance.
It's a central
Mr. Chair.
Ogun State.
Okay, so you were emphasizing it, that's why I apologize. I'll come for some lectures
You have to be more understanding.
on central banking.
Mr. Chair, thank
Okay,
you.
madam.
Just the mistake.
Again, on this judgment day,
Yes,
there was something you mentioned when you, oh, sorry. I thought I was losing my there was something else you mentioned that just made me a bit weary. That this is the portion that has been sent in by the Attorney General.
Yes,
But there's a bigger portion somewhere.
in the National Assembly. The President sent it in 2017.
A lot.
A lot.
Judgment days are hanging everywhere.
Yeah.
But this one is impinging on our national integrity. You can imagine the news.
Yes,
that the
that
Nigerian Commission in
has
England
been foreclosed.
That's the
was foreclosed.
Yeah. So, but basically what you're saying then is that what we're doing is a catch-up game.
Yes,
That's basically what you're saying.
yes.
So the next set of foreclosures that comes in panics us, and then we.
I like the analysis. And I'm a bit afraid.
Handling it as need arises.
Yes. But I think one of the things, and this is what the DMO presented to the board, so I mean, this is our committee, let's share it. In the medium-term debt management strategy, the one we have for 2020 to 2023, we increased the debt, total public debt to GDP ratio to 40%. It used to be 25% for many years, I'm sure a number of you. Okay, the reason we increased it, one of the reasons is this promissory notes that you are going to be issuing. They are not new borrowing, but you are going to be issuing, and as you issue, we have to put them in the public debt stock. So we're creating space to accommodate it. Yes, sir.
Are you in a position to explain to us how much of other judgment debts that are hanging that we have now holding?
Thank you. From 2 points, I should say. From the one outstanding for 2017, do you have that figure? Okay, okay, but we cannot. So from the one that the president submitted, because that was ballpark, we can give you that figure. But there's a committee in the Ministry of Finance. Are you a member of that committee? Of judgment debt? Yes, that is compiling, and we have 2 members. He's one of them. He's the desk officer for promissory notes, actually. He's one of them, and then our legal services, head of legal services, is also there. So they are compiling. So I imagine that it's now even more bigger than the one we submitted in 2017. So I don't know how far your work has gone. Do you want to speak? Not yet, yes? Okay, so they haven't finished.
So
It's chaired by the permanent secretary special duties.
selective in the holding judgment debts only when it's trying to give us a battle.
I wouldn't want to say so, but when it comes to judgment debts, we believe that is in the domain of the Honorable Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice. We don't have a role. We won't even know about it until we see letter.
DJ,
Yes, sir.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
You know, this promissory notes is new. Is it the same thing with the guarantee bond that is redeemable?
Like our FGN bonds?
Yes.
Technically, so with the federal government of Nigeria bonds
Yes.
or treasury bills, we use that to raise money. It's part of this 2.8 trillion naira. So it's new money that we get to use for the budget. With this one, we are simply telling somebody, I owe you, I don't have cash to pay you, so take
But I'm making a
over.
promise.
I promise, so it's an I owe you. I'll
But it's
pay you
redeemable.
after 1 year. Oh no, immediately you give them, they take it to the bank to discount it.
Okay.
Immediately. It doesn't take up to 1 week, by 2 days. So some of them used to settle their debts to banks.
Yes.
So for the public, it is the same federal government obligation. They know we will pay, which is why we include it in the debt stock, because we know we will pay. We can't tell stories.
So now, coming to the real day,
Yes, please.
June 2021, our total debt stock is 35.465 trillion.
Yes, sir.
Huh?
Yes, sir.
But we will now know by 31st June, by 31st December, we will now know what's.
Later this month, we'll have the September figures. They're reconciling. So that one will have the 4 billion euro bonds, for instance. So that automatically means that figure will be 39 anyway. No, 86 plus 4 in dollars. 86 plus 4 years. That's how it happens. It adds up.
It becomes 90.
That's right, sir.
And if you put the 4, we have the 86. It becomes 90.
1.5.
Okay?
The reason I'm making this point is that every time I hear people say the public debt stock is growing, the society is growing.
Sure. All right. And we are emphatic that the federal government component of the debt stock is 85%.
About, on the average.
While statistics states and the GCT
So
have
about
the other 15%.
yes.
That's the portfolio. Remember, move over to 2022. Okay, madam.
Thank you very much.
Let's hear it.
Okay. So again, we're on page 6 now, and I'll just speak to table 7 because it covers all the narratives. So for the first time, maybe the first time in the history of the DMO, we actually have a budget of 1 billion, right?
1 billion.
Yeah, our operational budget has 1.04 billion naira. Okay, personnel is 711.5. That remains our largest budget component. So we can see the difference between 2022 and 2021. People will be promoted.
Yeah.
Okay, overhead is still the same. Like I said at the beginning, the Ministry of Finance in the budget circular tell us to leave overheads. I'm in table 7, sir, on page 6. Leave the overheads as they are to control recurrent expenditure. Okay, capital expenditure is slightly lower at 173. So really, most of the increase for 2022 is going to personnel costs when you look at the table.
Any new employment?
No, we don't have approvals for now.
So people are not retiring.
They're retiring.
So they should be back.
Piecemeal. You know, our staff strength is really about 120, 125. So maybe once every 3 years, since the past 5 years, 1 or 2 persons resign for reasons of age largely. Yes. We're not big. We're not big. Yes. Okay, so that's as far as our budget goes. Then again, like I said, for 2022, there's a deficit in the budget that is expected to be financed from new borrowing. So I'm speaking to table 8 now, paragraph 20, on page 6. The total deficit, that is still before you anyway. The total deficit is 6.26 trillion naira. Out of that, 90 billion is expected from privatization proceeds. Then multilateral and bilateral loans that are included in the budget, some are funded from this loan. So there are loans already approved that will be disbursed. But new borrowing again is 5.012 trillion. So we'll see that it's only marginally lower than the one for 2021. Thank you. Okay. So this is how the budget in paragraph 21 on page 7, it says we will raise the new domestic borrowing and new external borrowing in equal proportions, 50-50. In the domestic market, we issue FGN bonds, treasury bills, savings bonds, sukuk, and sometimes green bonds to raise all of these monies. So you always see us in the paper with one advert or the other trying to raise money. External, the strategy remains, if we get from the multilateral and bilaterals, we will take it first and use it before we go to the international capital markets, but we're open, again, as we've done this year. For paragraph 23, again, is a projection for debt service. Yes, so if we look at table 10, the total debt service is 3.609 trillion. We can see that that is higher than the one for 2021, and that's because your debt stock has grown. The debt we raised this year, we have to service them. So that's the reason. The other question you asked us to explain is the repayment strategy for the debt service. The reality is that the projects that we fund are not revenue generating largely, except maybe for the rail lines, but those, I don't think they cover the operational costs of running the lines. Okay, even the sukuk, they are not revenue generating, as you are aware. That's why debt is serviced from provisions in the budget. Yes. So it's in the provisions here include principal for the ones that are maturing, interest, commitment fees. That's how we get by each day. So until we begin to look at projects that generate revenues, or for the rail lines where the government is getting commendation, maybe we can begin to increase the fees, because rail is financed really by borrowing.
Okay.
Until we get there, yes.
The repayment strategy.
That's the one I was speaking to. The projects are not generating revenues.
Oh.
Yes.
Thank you, DG.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, my respected colleagues. You were seeing our position for 2022. I quickly go over where you just stopped.
Okay.
Number one, we had an idea that we are owing PENCOM over 8, we are borrowed from PENCOM over 8 trillion. Does it have any implication for our national growth? Probably not. Fund for private sector.
Okay.
Constant borrowing from local banks. Does it have impact on our economy? Because
Okay.
private sector is being carried out, they will not have access to affordable finance for operations, but that's where we create jobs, expand the economy, and other things. Then, altogether, there are critical infrastructure that we believe that can directly impact on job creation. We have signed Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, but our industrial capacity has not really improved. That's why we were happy when AKK came on board. We saw the growing plan. But we want to make sure that other areas have strong gas infrastructure so that we can improve on our power generation. If that is done, then we'll be able to create job opportunities for people, we'll be able to compete in manufacturing goods that will be sold within sub-Saharan Africa. But as a subscriber to Continental Free Trade Agreement, we need to increase our capacity, both in manufacturing, agro-processing, and we need image to be competitive. Knowing our market size, our population, we have all it takes to dominate sub-Saharan African market. Instead of making allowances to be dumping ground, importing things we can manufacture. So these are the core things we're looking at. You said that we are borrowing and funding things that cannot pay easily.
Why PENCOM money?
Huh?
Why borrow the money from PENCOM? Is that the alternative, good alternative use for PENCOM money?
No. For
what you are saying, I'm supporting.
for infrastructure like rail, everywhere, you can use PENCOM to fund it. But it's a national asset that you can draw from. So PENCOM money, you don't need all the money one day to settle those.
But PENCOM money, that's what the national asset. You and I own the money. It does not belong to PENCOM. It's not our national asset.
Huh?
It's
like borrowing from the...
Or create economic corridors and do things and plan. Or concession the infrastructure, money that people, so that over time, 15, 20 years, they will get back. So we need to understand how to open up the roads. Revenue is not coming. And the way we look at even our debt service to revenue ratio, it's very important.
Very high.
Because if you look at it, if our revenue cannot service our debt, then we're not borrowing to pay for running costs, borrowing to pay for capital, everything, so that
Pay for the debt.
these are the costs.
So, Madam
You want to add something? Huh?
yes, at what rate are you borrowing from PENCOM?
Yes.
I want to know. Yeah, we need to know.
Yes.
Because for you to go to PENCOM, there's a catch there.
Yes.
It's not free.
Let me explain it.
The rest is high.
Let me explain.
Then why doing that?
Because you don't.
No, that's let me explain. Thank you very much. And I'm happy that this question actually came up about borrowing from PENCOM. The DMO doesn't borrow from PENCOM. PENCOM is a regulatory agency for the pension sector. So they are pension fund administrators where our contributions go, that they manage it. And they're supposed to give us returns, right? At the end of the year, we're supposed to get interest. So it is those pension fund administrators managing our money. My own twist there. It is they that invest part of that fund in the securities that we issue. It's not loan that they give us, it's this FGN bond.
They're investing it.
This FGN bond that we issue, this Nigerian treasury bills, the same way banks buy it, individuals buy it, insurance companies buy it. That's how they buy it, and it is an auction. It's not that we go to PENCOM, give us a part of it. So if you check at the assets of that PENCOM publishes of insurance companies, you see all the lines. You see all the lines, treasury bills, including these promissory notes, even I think some of them probably have bought because they are FGN papers. Okay, so it's not PENCOM that is giving us money. No. We're not borrowing it from them. It's an asset in their book, and if they want to sell it, they can sell it in the market, on the stock exchange or the FMDQ. So they're investments, and they are bought at the rate that is prevailing in the market. So let me also explain, because I think because we have a very strong aversion for borrowing, we have not looked at what happens in some other countries. The pension industry, so thankfully we had a pension reform in 2004. Okay, in other countries, even if you look at South Africa, the one nearest us here, the pension funds are huge. Some of them are bigger than banks, like in South Africa, because they've been there for 100 years. They're huge. So they actually fund infrastructure. They have huge buildings. If you pick some of them, Old Mutual, they're huge. Okay, so those funds that they raise, what would they do with it? How would they pay us returns if they are not investing in assets? Because it's we that they pay returns. So I think one of the things that borrowing by the government has done is to provide assets, safe assets. I'm not talking as dear mother. Provide safe assets where the pension funds can be invested. If these bonds were not there, where would they put the money? It would be sitting in banks as deposits. Really, that's what it is. Minimal return.
May I say something?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chair, when you're comparing to South Africa, like I made a statement a few minutes ago about the debt profile of the United States being very, very high.
Very high.
Yes, but guess what? It's productive.
Yes.
Our own debt ratio is high relative to our own environment, and it's not productive.
So that's the same who explained that second part. So this is the first part about PENCOM. So each time you read in the press that government, no, and it's not compulsory. In fact, the PENCOM has investment guidelines for pension funds. So they even have maximums that they can invest in various categories. So let's just say now there are FGN securities for them to invest. They are safe, they can earn returns. They still have investments in shares. They have investments in bonds issued by flour mills and all of that. So that's, it's not PENCOM. PENCOM only gives them guidelines. They don't invest those money. But I think we make a very good point about, and let's just say the debt service to revenue is high, and I haven't stopped talking about it this year in the two public hearings on MTEP we had here in the National Assembly. I made reference to it. As at August, this is figures by my Honorable Minister now, debt service to revenue was 71%. Because revenue is not growing, but we are borrowing. So you can see we borrowed 4 trillion last year, this year 5 trillion, next year 5 trillion. It doesn't just happen, that's the point I'm making. It looks like we just woke up and saw it. No, it's building from somewhere and from what we are doing. So I agree totally that we should stick to what the Fiscal Responsibility Act says. Borrow to finance capital and human capital development. That's what it says. But in a case where you are not earning as much revenues as you should, your recurrent expenditure is high, meaning personnel costs, we've decided as a government we can't send people to the streets unemployed, and then you are borrowing, your debt service is growing, you have to fund it. So the focus should shift to revenues. Why are we not earning as much as we do? And let me make a second point that we always say. We have the data, we can share it with you. The debt to GDP of those advanced countries are about 80% of GDP, some 100%. But guess what? Their debt service to revenue is less than 10%. Why? Because can you live in the US without paying taxes?
No.
No. Okay, so something is wrong. So they have a huge debt stock, but they are servicing it. Then the point you made about critical infrastructure, we're on board with that one. Let's see what we did with it. But let's also be mindful of the fact that there's now, I think a tolling policy was approved by the Federal Executive Council recently. But one of the arguments is, if the roads are not good, what are you putting there to collect toll from? So it's a chicken and egg game. So if we can focus on some priority ones, complete them end to end, you can toll like 4 or 5 points from it and earn revenues from them. So, but I know FEC approved the tolling policy, but that will be for works and housing to explain. Again, we are here as Nigerians. We know that the federal government, under the Economic Sustainability Plan last year for COVID, an infrastructure corporation was set up, owned by the Central Bank, Africa Finance Corporation, and NSI, with 1 trillion naira, purely for infrastructure. So let's see where that's good. There's also a presidential initiative on infrastructure. That's what is working on the second Niger and some part. So it's a slow process, but we have to generate revenues. Because you can borrow more if you have revenues. So you can quickly finance those assets and they begin to generate revenues.
2 more questions.
Yes, sir.
You said that on the SUCO, you're looking at between 200 and 250.
Yes.
Which one goes to Federal Ministry of Works and Housing? And which one goes to FCT? And I think there are about 3
ministries.
Huh?
3 ministries, yes.
Yeah, that asking for SUCO.
Yes, sir.
Well, FCT and who again?
Niger Delta.
Niger Delta, yeah.
What's that road?
Okay, then
East-West Road. So
we need to look at it because the truth is that as a nation, we are challenged from 2009 to date because of incidents of Boko Haram and general insecurity on mostly everywhere, and suddenly COVID. Our sources of revenue are depleted, and there's high level of low productivity across the nation. The cities are not productive because of lack of key infrastructure, the environment, a lot of things. We have potential to make much more than we are. The way you're talking of taxation, good, fine. A lot of people are not into the tax net. But you talk about tax people who don't have proper services and infrastructure. And also a lot of people, poverty prevalence is very high. So you can't overtax somebody who are already living below poverty line. So there is a mixture of all the things. But we as a people have to be determined. Create the right infrastructure, both in our economic infrastructure and social infrastructures. We pay so much for health, we don't get good health services. We pay so much for education, we don't get good educational services. Level of illiteracy is on increase. We are borrowing to improve on quality of education. You can see the borrowing plan, you see where we are trying to improve on education, health, that thing. But when we look at it and look at general impact, it doesn't seem that something is happening. That is why we say that the greatest challenge we have is insecurity across the nation. That is what is, because we are in a state of war. Money that are being raised is being used to fight war. So we need peace for us to progress. So let us all look at it critically, so that even when we borrow money, we use it for something that is productive, and we can feel the benefit. But when you sink into war, funding and other things, you cannot feel it, because you are fighting war. And look at Northeast, no economic activity. The other time, we started importing maize to do animal feed, because most farmers have been chased away by bandits. So we're not using little foreign exchange we have to go and import grains. We have over 200 dams, we have fertile land, we have sunshine. We normally produce our grains and export, but now we import grains, or else animal feed will go. So these are things we need to look at. So there is beyond everything. We need to sit down and know how to do these things. It's everybody's problem. So it's not, but if you don't go at all, it becomes a problem. So I'm looking at it that we'll have to really put our heads together and make the right choices on what we're borrowing so that we can easily get quick wins, stimulate growth quickly, and start making impact. And that's just my contribution to this. Honorable members, everybody's free.
Just to add
No,
to
no.
what the chairman said.
Yes, they did.
Well, just to add to what the chairman said. When we're borrowing, we should borrow for infrastructure or for projects that can bring return. Not borrowing for programs like school feeding, all manners of this thing. You borrow, you start sharing 10,000 to states. It does not make sense. So we should critically look at that too.
I think, Honorable Chairman, I think all of those are useful and things that we begin to focus on. But again, these things are collective. We do the budget and it comes here. So while we're looking at the other option, is really we have to start looking at concessioning or the other PPP arrangements that work. It doesn't have to be government all the time putting money there. I'm totally on board with you about the fact that we should develop infrastructure. And for me, infrastructure means you start from here to here. You can say in 3 years I'll complete it. And then you can start charging revenues. When you sit, yes, with due respect on both sides. So some contractors will tell you this road was awarded to them for 20 years. But in it's for 20 billion naira, let's just say. In each year, there's only 1 billion provided in the budget. So they say, is it in 20 years they will complete this road? Then we will come and then we will adjust it for interest and all of that. So that's why I'm saying maybe we need to look at how we finance those. Can we pick, we've talked about this, can we pick those critical ones and say in 3 years, this road is so important to us, let's complete it and toll it. So I think maybe that's where concessioning comes in. That's where Infraco comes in, and the presidential initiative on infrastructure, which is doing the second Niger bridge. Yes, those are huge funds that can come from the budget. We need to, we can't, this 100 million, 200 million in the budget for some projects. In 10 years, they are still under construction.
Honorable Police.
Thank you, sir.
I want to thank all of us. DG.
Yes, sir.
As a committee, we've had what to say because of budget preparation. If there's any further clarification from the preparation committee, we're not easy to call you in. As for now, no colleagues, we are free to go.
Thank you very much. We are grateful. Thank you.
We adjourn Senegal.